Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Natalie Dougal, and before joining the iClicker team, I was a composition and literature instructor for over a decade. Today, I'm going to present ideas about how you can use iClicker Cloud without devoting additional class time to its use. I'll even highlight some ways you can use iClicker Cloud to actually save time in your classes. So let's get started. When people think about in-class polling, they often think of asking questions like this, a very specific question with clear right and wrong answers, and it lets you see if your students can apply course concepts. For many instructors, this is a great way to use in-class polling. But in-class polling can do so much more than this, and has a place in classrooms where deep discussion, reflection, and questioning are the keys to mastering the subject at hand. It's also something that doesn't have to take a lot of investment when you first get started. An easy and innovative way to start using iClicker Cloud is to implement a concept known as entry and exit tickets. This teaching tool was first designed decades ago, and instructors handed out paper slips to their students and collected their responses in a basket as they entered or exited the room. This is an activity that can take place in moments that are normally wasted. With iClicker Cloud, you can also eliminate the use of paper and save your eyes from trying to decipher your students' handwriting. You'll also get consistent feedback from your students, and you'll know a lot more about where they are in the learning process. Here's how it works. Enter the room and turn on iClicker Cloud. You can project a question or just write the question you'd like your students to respond to on the board. Then set the poll to short answer and press the play button. Now as your students enter the classroom, they'll see the question and respond to it as they're waiting for class to start. Using a question like this also makes it easy for you to use iClicker Cloud as an attendance tool, possibly saving you time by letting you skip roll taking. What other kinds of questions do instructors ask in this context? They ask questions that have their students reflecting back on the last class meeting, the work they did outside of class, and long-term class projects. They can also ask questions that have their students looking forward to the next class meeting, the next formal assessment, and even to the next term. You and your students benefit from this activity in a number of ways. Starting your class with an entry question settles your students in and gets them ready to learn. If your students know you always ask a question as they walk into class, they start thinking about what they might say before they've even entered the room, setting the stage in their brain for more impactful learning sessions. You get important feedback that's easy to evaluate and save. Most importantly, it sets the stage for learning without losing any class time. Similarly, you could end class with an exit ticket, a question you ask at the close of class that your students answer as they are leaving. This type of activity is a great classroom management strategy. When students know you're going to ask one last question at the end of class, they're less likely to disengage and pack up early. This can also help you not be completely mobbed by your students at the end of class. If you have very little time to get from class to class, you can tell your students you'll respond to any issues raised over email or when your class meets next. This helps you connect with one group of students while not being late to meet with the next group. Exit tickets have many other benefits. They give students a discreet way to make contact with you in a way that feels low risk to them. You might be surprised by what your students have to say when they have an informal and relaxed way to reach out to you. You might think email can fit this need, but a struggling student can be intimidated by email, especially to someone that they admire, like their professor. Exit tickets also encourage our students to engage in reflection, which is essential to the learning process and can make your classes stickier. It also bookends our classes in a way that helps our students stay engaged while digesting the learning session more thoroughly. All of this relies on class time that is usually lost to packing up bags and shuffling papers. Entry and exit tickets build connections between class sessions like links in a chain. It provides a concrete way for your students to reflect and discover the connections between class meetings and the work they do outside of class. As they respond to these questions throughout the term, they create a living study guide that they can review and use to further reflect on the important work you've done in the classroom. All of this without losing any precious class time and with very little additional work on your part. If you were to use iClicker Cloud only at the start and end of your classes, you would still be creating something helpful for both you and your students. Another way you could use iClicker Cloud in your classes to save time is to use iClicker Cloud as a virtual hand-raising tool. How many times do you pause during a class session and ask your students if they have any questions? Sometimes the response is overwhelming, and you have to sort through waving hands and hope you remember everyone's name. And other times, all you hear are virtual crickets, and you can look at your students' faces, you can tell they don't quite understand, but no one is saying something. Instead of asking your students at random intervals if they have questions, you can instead turn on a short answer iClicker Cloud polling question, where your students can send you questions as they occur to them. Now your students have an avenue to ask questions as you go along, and you have a record of what your students found challenging or unclear. As you speak, you can see if you have any responses. You don't have to turn off the poll to check and see what your students are asking about. Not all the questions will be academic. You can choose to answer any questions you get in the moment, or if time is tight, you can send an email to your students later, giving them answers to their questions. Additionally, your students have a record of those questions. This can become a really excellent study guide for your students and a dynamic way for you to learn more about where your students may need additional clarification. This tool works especially well if you have a guest lecturer or when you have students giving presentations. These occasional presenters may not be used to fielding questions, and you can make question and answer sessions a little less chaotic and more formal for those special guests. Another way you can save class time is to ask confidence and comprehension questions with iClicker Cloud instead of verbally asking our students if they understand. I know I have a bad habit of asking my students, "Did everybody get that?" But I need to be honest with myself. Only the most confident, outgoing student is going to raise their hand in front of all of their peers and confess that they don't know what's going on. By using iClicker Cloud to gauge understanding, you know that even your shyest student can communicate confusion to you. Simply do a comprehension check after explaining a concept and get immediate feedback from your students without doing a verbal poll that might not get you honest results. A study just published out of Harvard found that students who respond to verbal questions with a show of hands are heavily impacted by herd mentality, and they shape their responses to fit in with their peers. With a system like iClicker Cloud, students may answer more honestly. Even when you don't have time to explain the concept again right in that moment, you can extract the individual responses from the polling question and then respond to students' questions individually via email. Another way you can save class time with iClicker Cloud is in regards to group work. In-class small group work is essential to many disciplines, but this type of work introduces a lot of variables that can suck up class time like a sponge. You can use iClicker Cloud to sort your students into groups, and then again to keep those groups on track, giving you a lot more control over the time you devote to these types of activities. For example, I know when I ask students to sort themselves into groups, they can be really slow to move and they tend to pick the same people over and over again. If I ask for groups of 3, I'll end up with some groups of 2, some of 4, and a few students who try and fly solo because their usual partners are out that day. This means I'm either going to waste time reshuffling the groups and chiding my students for not sorting themselves better, or I let them complete the exercise with group sizes all over the place, reducing the effectiveness of the exercise I designed. Instead, you can use iClicker Cloud to have your students sort themselves into groups of equal number with more variety. Turn on a multiple choice question, show the results, and tell your students to balance the bars. Be sure to limit your students to a number of responses that fit the number of students you have in class that day. For example, if you have 15 students in your class and you want your students to be in groups of 3, have your students balance A, B, and C only. Once the bars are balanced, stop the poll. Then tell students to get into groups with 1A, B, and C per group. This sorts your students quickly, improves variety, and makes it easier for shy students to find their way into a group. This can also save you the time of having to address this part of classroom management. Beyond that, you can assign your students roles easily once they're in the group by simply saying every A needs to take notes or every C is going to be the spokesperson for the group. Moving forward, you can use iClicker Cloud to keep your groups on track as they work. Instead of having your students work through a sheet of questions or exercises together, where some groups are going to race through the questions and others are going to dawdle, you can keep the class moving through each question together by using polling, allowing them to explore each question with adequate time and giving you a lot more control over exactly how long these class activities can take. iClicker Cloud can also be used to keep class-wide discussions productive and on track. I love lively in-class discussions when they're full of energy and fun, but they can really set me back in my lesson plan. To be honest, this is an area where my classes can really go sideways. I love meandering conversations that surprise us, but sometimes these conversations take over a class session and derails the class session. And then I have students who haven't met the objectives of the lesson plan. This is a huge problem when I'm teaching multiple sections of the same class. Then I'll have one class that's on one track and maybe two other classes that are following the lesson plan more traditionally. And it just creates a headache for me. By using iClicker Cloud as a discussion management tool, you can still have lively discussions while feeling confident that your lesson is going to stay on track. On the other hand, you might have a group of students who are really reluctant to start talking. Drawing that group out takes a lot of time and energy away that could be better used elsewhere. By using iClicker Cloud to kick off a discussion, you give reluctant students an opportunity to collect their thoughts and participate without you having to endure the sound of crickets. Using iClicker Cloud to guide discussion is very simple. Create questions for your students either before class or on the fly in class when the moment is right. I can add a question to my lesson plan without any pre-planning. Here's all I have to do. Open a word processing document, type in my question for my students, set the poll to short answer, and then press play. That's it. Now, I might want to let my students have free range with their responses, or I might kind of want to limit them a little bit more with a multiple choice option. Change the poll to multiple choice and press the play button. Multiple choice can be especially nice if you have misconceptions about the topic that you'd like to address head on. Open the poll, let your students respond, and then ask for students to volunteer to defend their various choices. In this way, you can keep discussion focused, especially if you have a number of discussion questions you'd like to explore. You're also making students who might check out during discussion or freeze from shyness active participants in these important moments of class discussion, giving every student a voice. The last idea I have for you in regard to saving time with iClicker Cloud is iClicker Cloud Quizzing. This is a newer iClicker Cloud feature that can save you time when it comes to pop quizzes. With iClicker Cloud Quizzing, your students can take multiple choice assessments, pacing themselves as they move through the quiz. You can keep the answers hidden so multiple sections don't share results with one another. And you'll be able to grade and return these quizzes faster than it would take to walk across campus with an armful of Scantrons. iClicker Cloud Quizzing is especially helpful for those of you who use Scantrons in your courses to conduct frequent quizzes. Your students won't need to purchase paper testing strips, and you won't have to lug out the Scantron machine, feed them through, enter the results in your gradebook, then keep track of those awkward slips of paper until you can return them to your students. Instead, you'll distribute the same assessment that you would have used with the Scantrons and turn on iClicker Cloud Quizzing. All I have to do is X out of my menus. From this drop-down menu, select Start Quizzing Session. It asks me how many questions the quiz has, how many points I want each question to be, and I can rename the quiz if I want to. When everything is ready to start the quiz, click the play button. Now you can see how many students you have in a class and how many of those quizzes have been submitted. Your students get to take the quiz in their own time and with their own pace. They review their answers before they submit them, and they're able to go ahead and change them if they change their mind about something. When they submit, they have to state that they did not cheat. And then you can see how many of your students still need more time. I know that I can waste a lot of time in a class by asking who needs more time? Who needs more time? And there are two types of students who will always need more time. They will be our students who are very high achieving, who want to get an A on absolutely everything. And then there'll be their students who maybe didn't do the studying that they were supposed to do, and they're kind of freaking out, and so they're changing all their answers all the time. When I'm satisfied with how many students have finished the quiz, I can go ahead and I can stop it. Right now, 2 of my 3 students have stopped it. So I might say, all right, I'm going to give you 30 more seconds to complete the quiz. If I hit this stop button before students have all submitted their quizzes, don't worry, no one's going to end up with an absolute 0 unless they've answered no questions. Whatever answers they have completed at the point when I stop the quiz will still be recorded in their grades. Once the quiz is closed, you can grade the quiz by going through the answers, quickly touching on whichever are the correct answer. Now, I really wasn't paying much attention to that quiz. I just randomly touched correct answers there, so if you knew that I made a mistake, I'm sorry. In just a few seconds, I've graded all of the questions on the quizzes, and my students know the score that they got on the quiz. Now, if I want to keep the answers to the quiz private, I want to make sure that I keep this box here unchecked. If you're teaching multiple sections of a course and you have a morning and an afternoon class, you wouldn't want your morning class to inform your afternoon class on which were the correct answers. And so you may choose to let your students only see their scores from the quiz instead of seeing each question individually and which one was the right answer. On the other hand, you might really want your students to have this feedback, and so you can go ahead and click this box. Something else that you can do that I really like is you can actually give your students written feedback on each question. So here I could say, I noticed a lot of people missed this question. I really want you to review chapter 27. I'd like you to go and view this YouTube video. You could put a link in there that your students could follow, or you could say, hey, come and talk to me during office hours if this concept is still creating problems for you. So now you've graded all of your quizzes, and your students' results are automatically entered in the iClicker Cloud Gradebook, saving you an incredible amount of time and saving your ears from having to hear the of the Scantron machine. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope this has you seeing how you can use iClicker Cloud without sacrificing class time. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear from you.